Welcome to CareHero podcast, where our mission is to educate, motivate, and inspire nurses and other healthcare professionals. In each episode, we explore how our guests successfully advance their careers and improve the lives of their patients and residents. We share practical tips and success stories to illustrate how you, our care heroes, can grow in your own personal and professional lives.
Hello, Care Heroes. Welcome back, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Care Hero Podcast. I'm your host, Gerard Hernandez.
And I'm Martin Hoy, and we've got an incredible guest coming on today's episode.
Yes, our guest is Sean Clarke, Executive Vice Dean and Professor hailing from the same place as you're at, Martin, the Big Apple, New York City.
That's right, Gerard. That's where I live. And Sean is an exceptional nurse academic with over 2 decades of higher education experience as a professor, research manager, and academic administrator.
Sean has a remarkable story and valuable knowledge to share, including the significance of prioritizing self-care as a way to stay engaged with your role, the value of surrounding yourself with good people and environments, to not be afraid of communicating your thoughts and feelings, and the importance of staying open to new opportunities and not getting discouraged when things don't go according to plan.
Love it. Let's do it up, Gerard.
Hi, Sean. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Terrific. We always start off our show with this question. All of our care heroes, including yourself, are superheroes. But if you had to choose one superpower, what would that be and why?
I think I would like that trick that Hermione in Harry Potter has, where she can stop time and move between different things, take more than one class at once, be in more than one place at once, because I always feel as if there's more than one awesome thing going on at the same time that I'd like to be part of.
Yes, the time turner. Time turner. Yeah, I love that. And I love that it's because you want to be able to do more things that excite you and be participating on. That's terrific.
Yeah, if we could double myself, I'd be twice as effective, or maybe 3 times. Depends on how you think about it.
Yeah, maybe you could do this podcast on your own.
So, Sean, you're an experienced nurse academic with over 2 decades of higher education experience as a professor, research manager, and academic administrator. And you had a long career as a clinician before that. Could you tell us a little bit about your life story, your background, and how you got into healthcare?
Yeah, thank you. I came from a family, no health professionals in the family, actually, but a fair amount of contact in the family with healthcare services, I guess. And I had started out my undergrad education thinking that I might want to be a psychologist. I was interested in the helping professions. But I did volunteer work in hospitals, and I came into contact with a lot of nurses, and I saw them doing what they did, and I just thought it was really cool what they did. And I thought they were really interesting people who had a very balanced sense of life. And I kind of wanted to be like them. And then I started looking into what opportunities there were in nursing and decided to sign up for a nursing education program once I had done some undergrad studies in biochemistry and psychology. It was not necessarily a choice that my parents were thrilled about. I think they were thinking that I was going to do something a little more traditional. But at the same time, I have been nothing but delighted at the opportunities that I've had and the people that I've met through the work. I moved from my hometown, Ottawa, Canada, to Montreal, kind of the big city where there's a lot of dynamism, a lot of mixing of cultures and so forth, and loved nursing school, knew I wanted to be a researcher. So I had an opportunity to do a PhD early in my career, but then also had opportunities to work in clinical practice along the way. And then kind of one thing happened after another in terms of the jobs. I went from finishing my PhD and having taught for a few years in my hometown down to Philadelphia, where I trained as a nurse practitioner and got some finishing research training, I guess, a postdoctoral fellowship. And I got into studying hospitals and nurses and their working conditions, which is what always interested me from the start. And then was at University of Pennsylvania for another 7 years after that. There was an opportunity to go back to Canada in a different kind of a role, working half-time in a hospital, half-time in the university. So that was really cool. Got to go back to Montreal for a few years. Then went down to Boston to run an undergraduate program in nursing at a very, very fine university that was very different than the Canadian and American universities where I'd been before. And now I have the opportunity of a lifetime working at New York University, where, as opposed to teaching and managing a research group, I oversee faculty affairs, meaning I help with the selection of professors and the mentoring of them so that they can be the best teachers and the best scholars possible. And so that we can make sure that NYU Meyers College of Nursing, which is my employer, that we can have the biggest impact possible in New York, in the US, and around the world. So that's my story in a nutshell, I guess. Wasn't sure where I'd wind up when I started the whole business, but it's worked out pretty well for me.
Training the next generation of nurses. I mean, that's amazing, especially now. I mean, there's a renewed interest in getting more nurses in the profession, because everyone we've been interviewing, everything we've heard, and all the stats show that there's going to be, and there's continuing to be a huge nursing shortage.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of shortage, this is stuff that I study in my research. And I mean, there are so many opportunities for talented people who are either looking to start a career right out of high school or who are looking to turn to something in healthcare after having done work in another field. And certainly the opportunities, even though we don't know exactly how the healthcare system is going to evolve, there's going to be so many opportunities for smart, well-educated people from a diversity of backgrounds who are interested in helping others. And nursing is just an awesome opportunity to do all of that. We have room for lots of people with lots of different interests.
Great. Okay, Sean, so for our listeners, I want to dive into your career right now. Yeah, so you're the Executive Vice Dean and Professor at NYU Rory Meyers College of Nursing. Could you tell us more about your role and what you do daily?
Yeah. So, as I was mentioning before, one of my big things that I do on a daily basis, I work with faculty. So as opposed to my previous job, when I was an associate dean responsible for an undergrad program, and it was my responsibility to make sure the courses ran properly and the students got what they needed. And if a student was going off course, figure out a way to get them back on course if they were missing classes and all the rest. Now my role involves supporting faculty and making sure that we do a good job selecting faculty, making sure that we help them understand their responsibilities and onboard them, and then that we support them from month to month, year to year as their careers go on, and that they hit certain benchmarks and milestones in their careers. And that is something that takes up a good chunk of my time. And I work with other people in the College of Nursing and in the university to make that happen, because of course, many nursing schools are in universities that have many different areas like engineering and law and arts and sciences. And there's some things that are specific to nursing schools that don't operate in those other areas. Another big part of my role is actually helping make what they call faculty governance run. So we have a lot of committees where professors are having a lot of say because they're the clinical experts and they know what it's like to educate students and they know what they need to do that. We let faculty have a lot of say in a whole bunch of aspects of the running of the school. And in order to keep those committees running, we have to intervene to some extent to make all that run. And then I would say the third big category of things is kind of what they call and all other duties as assigned. We are a big college of nursing. We have over 1,600 students and 80 full-time faculty and 200 adjuncts at any one time. We have a global outreach because our university is a global university, and we have campuses in the Emirates and also in China, as well as global campuses, and we have activities going on. And so basically I go wherever my boss, the dean, tells me to go in terms of helping work out the details of different new projects and new collaborations that we want to work out, and making sure that things get unstuck when there are things that need to be coordinated across different professors in different areas of the university. So it's a job right now that involves an awful lot of desk and computer and Zoom work, but in the end, what's in back of it is trying to support the students, give them the best learning opportunities possible as they learn to be caregivers, and making sure the professors have the best environment possible to do their own work and that they have opportunities to grow, because we want faculty that feel as if they want to keep looking after patients at the bedside or in clinic alongside their teaching. We want them to be able to do that. If the faculty want to be going out and getting research grants from different kinds of organizations to shape the new direction of care, we want them to have a chance to do that. So there's a fair amount of work behind the scenes, but it's not necessarily what you typically think of when you think of a nurse, but I'm proud of it. And I think it's part of the fabric of the profession. And regardless of what I'm doing, I'm always thinking that what we're doing is so that people can get better healthcare in the end.
Wow, just listening to that is so inspiring. I mean, if I'm a care hero listening to this right now, just listen to that, what Sean just talked about, the opportunities that life and nursing could take you. That was just so inspiring to hear. Even though it's on the academic side, it is something that we want to expose our listeners to, like other paths you're going to be able to take, not just in the bedside. So that's so amazing to hear, Sean.
Yeah. And I mean, the bedside is amazing. I mean, there's enough meat to the work of nursing that regardless of where you work, whether it's a long-term care facility, a hospital, a clinic, whether you mostly provide direct care, whether you train other nurses too, there's just so many opportunities to grow and to evolve. And one of the beautiful things about nursing as a career is there's always new roles and new opportunities to contribute. And it's not like you have to cut off other opportunities to change and to grow as your life circumstances change and as your interests evolve. So that's what I love about nursing. And that's what I love. That's why I'm never hesitant to recommend nursing as a career to anybody. If you are a person who fundamentally likes other people and have a good head on your shoulders, we have a place for you in nursing, and we have opportunities that you can grow in over the course of a career.
Amazing. Now, switching gears a little bit to talk about your research, we at CareHero Podcast have started to talk a lot about nurse engagement because that's something that comes up in all of our interviews. Now, you're a renowned expert on nurse staffing in hospitals, nurse working conditions. You found in several of your publications that engaged workers have more energy, are more enthusiastic about their jobs, and contribute to better quality of patient care. Could you describe some of that research?
Yeah. So this work, and I mean, I was inspired by the idea and the promise of making working conditions for nurses better. That's kind of what I wanted to do in research. And when the opportunity to do research in this area and collaborate with folks who are getting into this came up, specifically in the late 90s, when I was getting ready to do postdoctoral training, I had the excellent fortune to be part of a research group headed up by a literally legendary nurse researcher who did work in this area. And on my first day of my postdoctoral fellowship, and I was all eager and ready to go, she said something that stuck in my brain and, sort of is with me all the time. And she said, if I had to sum up what we've found so far and what we need to understand better, it's the idea that you can have the best educated nurse in the world and you can have him, her, them working in a setting where there's, in theory, great staffing, or maybe there isn't. But if you are having them work in a work environment that is not conducive to them bringing their best to the bedside, i.e., they don't have a good working relationship with their managers. When they're working with other nurses or with other health professionals, things are tense or, not collaborative or whatever. If nurses are not feeling as if they have the right support services behind them in order to devote the time on things that are going to make a difference to patients, if they don't feel that nursing's voice is valued within their facilities, if you don't have those different things going on, and some of them are important in different circumstances more than others, but you will not get the best outcomes. Even if you have the smartest, most dedicated, most educated nurses, you will not get the best outcomes for patients. You will see more turnover than you need to. And the work will take a bigger toll, will take a bigger bite than it needs to out of nurses. And it will discourage them from staying in place or even staying in the profession. And so we have to understand those working conditions. Staffing levels are really important, probably because they form sort of a baseline for the kind of care that can be delivered, how much attention each patient can get, and how much time can be spent on different things within the various work that's done. But you also need to think about what it's like for that person to come into work every day and carry out their work. And that, to me, is sort of what the work environment and the engagement sort of feeds into. We're, of course, very interested in burnout, that phenomenon, which is common to a lot of human services work, where you have to bring not only knowledge and skill, but you also need to bring a piece of yourself to this and make yourself available to people who are going through difficult experiences or stresses or whatever. But the flip side of burnout is engagement, the positive side of things, where people feel invigorated by the challenges and they want to come into work and they want to help other people be their best, whether it's their patients or their colleagues. And, that's what we really need to focus on. Now, I think burnout is really important. There are circumstances that might challenge any mortal human being, let alone, and even a care hero. And we need to make sure that we protect people from, sort of the physical and the psychological risks that are associated with doing what at times can be very hard work. But more than that, we need to really focus on how we can make this work as challenging and invigorating, I guess, as possible, and make people feel in nursing as if we not only value the services they provide day to day, week to week, but we're also interested in what this looks like for them when they do this over the course of years, and that we aren't just trying to squeeze out every last bit of time and energy and night shift out of them and compassion, but that we value them as people and we want them to be able to continue the work as long as possible.
Well, Sean, the nurse working conditions really ties to another key component of an engaged workforce. That is the health and well-being of the healthcare workers. So in your research, have you found any tried and true methods for improving the well-being and happiness of nurses and other healthcare professionals?
That's a great question. I mean, I think when you look at some of these elements, when you're looking at health, and well-being, that's sort of big territory. I mean, there's the physical health stuff and there's the emotional well-being and spiritual well-being, I guess. And nurses, just like anybody else, they're complicated people. They are living all kinds of different circumstances in their personal and their professional lives. There are a lot of nurses that, in addition to their main job, they kind of have side hustles or side gigs going on. They're working on their educations. They're moving up. They're doing things to widen their horizons and maybe those of their family and their loved ones, which is just awesome. I think when we think about health and well-being, I think it's important to recognize that nursing work takes place in many, many different settings. There are some inherent challenges in the work in terms of the physical demands that it requires of folks. For people who work in settings where work hours can be variable and aren't always consistent, there's a whole business around sleep and rest and so forth, which has very powerful effects on people's physical and emotional well-being. Depending on the setting, sometimes, there are risks that are very manageable that are associated with possibly being exposed to infectious diseases or different kinds of drugs and chemicals and so forth, inadvertently. In addition to that, there is this pressure, this time pressure that a lot of people feel when they're working in the field where there's just way too many things to be done. And if you're not careful, you can take it personally if you're not able to do everything that you'd like to do on behalf of your patients. I think one of the things that we've learned that's really important is to acknowledge that this is such important work. The public values it, but even just naming the challenges and at times the hazards and educating each other about this is really, really critical. And good nursing workplaces make sure that their employees are aware of what those risks are. They know what measures have been put in place to keep those risks to a minimum. And they're always educating their workforce about how to avoid risks, but also how to stay healthy and engaged. And I think if I could say, in addition to, sort of maintaining an awareness that there are special things about nursing and making sure the organization takes those things into effect and that there's good communication about that, it's that communication piece, that there is some mechanism in almost every good nursing organization that has nurses functioning in a healthy manner and keeps them engaged and so forth, where there's a built-in feature of the way business is done, where management and nurses practicing on the front lines, if you'll forgive the military metaphor, or, in direct care roles, they're talking to each other. That it's not that management is over on one side and the direct caregivers are on the other, that they're talking to each other on a regular basis. They're aware of each other's realities. And as a result, the people who are delivering direct care are not feeling as if they're on their own, sort of coming up to their eyeballs in terms of responsibilities and that nobody's hearing them. I think one thing that's really critical to well-being is a sense of connectedness to your patients, that you feel you're doing something that's important for them, connection to your coworkers, that you feel you're part of a larger team, and that, also a connection to your workplace, that, somehow you feel as if your teams are part of something bigger and really positive that's going on in the community and the profession. And as much as we can do to connect nurses to those other elements, those other things, I think that helps people maintain their perspective, also feel hopeful and feel empowered to do good work on behalf of themselves and their patients in the profession.
Yeah, absolutely. Like increasing awareness, that open communication, but that unfortunate thing is, in a lot of healthcare organizations, that's easier said than done, or it's not really the a lot of the top healthcare systems. Yes, they have these things in place, but that's unfortunately not the commonplace everywhere.
I agree. And time is always the reason. But if you talk to almost anybody in any sector of the economy, in any field, they will talk about all of the demands on their time. And time is of the essence. And, where we spend our time is a reflection deep down about what we value. And I'm not putting it on nurses who are working in direct care roles or who are teaching, directly, they're directly teaching students or whatever, when they feel not enough time to do a good job, to do what they want, that it's their fault in any sense. But what I would put in a plug for in connection with what we've just said is I would really love to see us figure out ways to get more of the passionate, like the many, many passionate people who enter nursing interested in leadership positions and in developing as leaders. And it's not a matter of walling yourself off or cutting yourself off from the passion for delivering clinical care. It's a matter of thinking about how, as a leader, you can also affect the delivery of care by helping clinicians and by shaping a good environment for care. I think in a lot of sectors, being a manager is not seen as all that desirable a role, but you think about the complexity of healthcare and how much assistance people delivering complicated care, the assistance that they might need to do that. And we need really good leaders and managers. And I would love to see more people getting hooked into that. You have to be hooked in at the right time. These roles are not great roles until you've gotten a little bit of maturity in the profession and you have a clue what's going on. But it would be great if we saw more people interested in diving into that. We've had a good history around that, many exceptional leaders in the profession, but we'd like to see more people and more people in the current generation expressing an interest and letting us guide them into opportunities that might help them see what's possible.
Let's dig into that a little bit. So we've had CNOs and nurse executives come on the show before, and they have a perspective on things. You have a very unique perspective because you've been to multiple academic environments and you've seen many cohorts of nurses come through and you've taught them all. You've seen them kind of advance in their careers. I'm sure you stay in touch with some of them. From your perspective, what's the best way to do that? What's the best way to advance in your career? Especially, we talked about education. That's often a big one. So let me maybe answer the question two ways: factors like education and factors other than education.
Right. I mean, of course, especially in North America and both Canada and the US, there's been a lot of emphasis in education as an ingredient of professional mobility. And so, of course, folks that sort of want to move into expanded roles, we've encouraged them to pursue advanced studies within the profession, to go get their bachelor's degrees if they haven't already done so, and, to sort of follow a pathway either within nursing or graduate education in some other connected areas like management or law or, any of a variety of paths. And I think before you go for education, and I'm a professor and an associate dean, now an executive vice dean, I'm going to go for education as a good mechanism for career mobility every time. But education, the choice of where you go and what you do, I think nurses need to think through carefully what they are hoping to get out of those experiences and what makes people engaged if they pursue more education, what helps keep them motivated, even in the tougher moments in advanced training and so forth, is a connection to what they're passionate about and what they love to do and what kinds of influence or impact that they want to have. And I would wait to pursue more education until something catches, I guess, in terms of I see this particular kind of education is connecting with what I want to do in the future. And, there's just so many opportunities out there. And one of the things about the technology that's available is you can enroll in universities and in programs that cross state and national lines. There's so many opportunities out there. You just have to think of what it is that you want to do and connect to that. I think as much as education, it is that passion or that commitment to something that makes people into stars, whether they're people who provide direct care to patients in different settings, or whether they sort of move into some of these other supplementary or complementary roles or whatever, like management and education and so forth. I think another really, really critical thing beyond education is looking for opportunities to test out the fit of a particular area or working with a particular subgroup, that often you don't need to sort of cut yourself off. You're a hospital nurse, let's say, and you're doing fine. You don't have to necessarily cut yourself off from working in the hospital to plunge yourself into full-time graduate study or whatever. You can sort of merge into that. And in fact, merging into that is a great idea. Participating in committees, asking to shadow people, connecting to professional organizations, or even what can be really, really cool is finding things and opportunities and organizations and activities that are slightly off to the side, that have connections to healthcare, or they're connections to a community and to improving life in a community, but they're off to the side a little. Joining an organization that physicians are primarily involved in, for instance, or deciding to get politically active in some form, or whatever. That often what happens in terms of, sort of an evolution in a career is you turn into it. It's not a 180-degree turn, but a gradual turn into something, and opportunities evolve over time. Education is often an important catapult or stimulus, gives people momentum to a certain extent, but jumping into education too early can be a mistake because before you formed an accurate idea of what that training is going to be like and what it's going to bring you in terms of your development.
Right. Just like any other graduate degree, especially if we're talking about post-baccalaureate, understanding what you're going to get, what program, because you get into the specialties and you get into the different types of job roles you can take after is important. But that's great. I think that you've said so many different things. We've heard it from others, and we've heard it from you very succinctly, is getting involved, both in your workplace and outside of your workplace, to give you those opportunities to serendipitously meet people that can really propel you. And I know that you've also, previously before the interview, you talked about mentors and having different mentors, different aspects of your career. And those are great places that, I found mentors, and I'm sure many of our listeners will also be able to find mentors that way.
Absolutely. And mentors, you have different mentors over the course of your career, and you can have even different mentors at the same time who are experts in different areas or different sides of what you're interested in getting into. And just because, you work with a mentor really closely doesn't mean that either you or the mentor are obligated to carry that beyond the point where it's useful for the both of you. There's a whole etiquette of the courtesy element of things, the care and feeding of mentors, and how to gracefully enter and exit a mentoring relationship. But there's a lot of power in that. And rather than, for instance, waiting for this sort of idealized image of a powerful person who's going to, sort of open the golden gates, the mentor may be somebody who's much more close by sometimes and might be a window for you into aspects of yourself and opportunities within your own workplace or an educational program that you weren't aware of. But the connecting is just so very important. An opportunity to imagine yourself in different kinds of roles. And the only way to do that is to explore a little bit and to be willing to take some chances and then listen to your responses about what works for you, what feels satisfying, where you feel you're able to do your best. And, to decide that some things are not the best for you, or when things are really on a roll, to pursue them full throttle.
Excellent. So Sean, how did you continue to learn in your role, especially when you're in bedside, but also, when you're early career?
We have different ways of doing it now, than what we might have done back 25 years ago, 30 years ago when I started my career. But reading is a huge, huge thing. Now it's as much electronic media and electronic books and journals and so forth, but just always being aware, not only of the importance of networking and talking to people and sometimes going to conferences and so forth. And now we do virtual conferences, but also taking the opportunities where they come up to stand back and go read about things. You hear about something, somebody's talking about an author or a trend or something that's happening, and taking the time to go look it up to find out some more about it and to sort of be in a dialogue between whatever you're experiencing in the field, like at the bedside, and what other people are saying about this. And after a while, it kind of becomes a habit because you inevitably, like, lights go on. You work at the bedside in the hospital and, you're not all that familiar with a particular clinical medical condition. You studied it in school or whatever. You learned about that medication in pharmacology class, but you go back and you read now, and I'm talking about reading for weeks and weeks and weeks. I'm talking about, sort of in the moment, pursuing the interests and the questions that come up in your work as you go along. And I think reading in one form or another, and now it's much, much more about the internet and social media and other things, but always sort of looking for opportunities to enrich, if you want to put it that way, your understanding of what's going on in your workplace by seeking out resources, talking to people, and then sometimes going to conferences can be really cool. In critical care nursing, for instance, there's this amazing conference every year called the National Teaching Institute, the American Association of Critical Care Nurses. And it's kind of like a Disney World for anybody who works in critical care units. You got clinicians and educators from, every possible specialty, and they're interested in talking about everything from the basics of critical care all the way up to the bleeding edge technologies that are currently being used to save lives in different places. And people go, and managers send nurses to those places, and nurses fund themselves to go to those conferences to just soak up for, days at a time, everything that's going on. And then they take those ideas and they roll that back into their practice. As my career has evolved along, I make a point of going and looking stuff up and reading about stuff that I hear about. And also being really honest, making sure that in addition to reading a lot in healthcare and in research, making sure that I also have some contact with media that are more general interest kinds of venues, sort of newspapers of record and various kinds of news media, or even, sort of reading nonfiction as well as fiction, for insights into like what's going on in the world, experiences that, I might have some insight into, but not really. And always looking for things that are either going to help me understand things better or looking for opportunities to be surprised and to discover that I really didn't know as much as I thought about something after all.
Amazing. Yeah, I similar to you, I think reading is probably my number one way. And I listen to audiobooks, listen to podcasts. There's just so many ways to get information these days. And you never know what will have a relevance to, the work that you're doing.
You really don't. And my career is kind of a decades-long testament to unforeseen opportunities, serendipitous opportunities to be involved in things. And you do start to see the connections between things. And I think you start to see even a few years into a career, but especially when, you're into the decades plural, you really do see the way things connect, and experiences that you've had in the past or things you learned about before, they have applicability and they help the work be more interesting. They help you identify and connect with people. They help you do a better job in the end.
It's terrific advice for our listeners. Be a sponge, and you don't know where that knowledge that you absorb is going to be useful later, be connected.
And that it doesn't necessarily always have to be in healthcare as healthcare. I mean, there's a lot to know. You could spend 10 careers in nursing and never learn everything there is to learn about the profession and the ways you connect. But there's a lot of life and ideas and stuff going on out there to learn about, and that it's okay to have reached your capacity for a while about reading or listening about healthcare, that learning about anything can be a useful thing in helping enrich your career in nursing.
What is one of the most inspiring or touching moments you've ever had in your career, Sean?
I would say when I think about that, when I think about what inspires me and what keeps me going, and, I feel very fortunate to do what I do and to work with such wonderful people and to have had the experience of working with such wonderful people over time. I've spent a lot of my career on the education side of the fence, I guess. And I've worked with students who all have had this voice inside them that told them that they should become nurses somehow, or that told them that they should become nurses who took the next step in their educations. And life throws all kinds of curveballs at people and sometimes makes it more difficult to bring our best forward in different circumstances. And when I think of what's been most satisfying for me is when you have a student who comes to the other side, who makes it to graduation. I mean, graduation is like bar none my favorite day of the academic year, and seeing students celebrating with their families, it's just really, really awesome. And when I was an academic dean, knowing a lot of their stories and a lot of detail about the path that got them there, and being enormously proud of everything that they had overcome in order to get there, and thinking of what an awesome, empowered person was going out into the world to go do good things. So, pretty much, and I mean, it happens, sometimes the endings aren't so happy, people, it's really in the students and the program's best interest that the student, take a pause and maybe revisit whether nursing is for them. But a lot of the most inspiring moments have been when students had barriers in front of them that looked to them as if they were insurmountable, but they, with the right advice, they were able to mobilize their energy and their resources, make it happen. And then the light went on and they recognized what they had done. And, that's the case for every single teacher, whether it's K to 12 or universities in general, but it's especially inspiring in nursing because we know that we're preparing the next generation of caregivers, folks that will touch the lives of hundreds, if not thousands of people. So it makes it just super, super cool. I love nursing for the diversity of our students in terms of backgrounds. And I am always inspired by the passion that people bring and the way the profession somehow does some kind of magic within itself to find places for folks from who come at this from all different places. And, just the opportunity to be involved a little bit in opening doors and keeping those doors open is particularly inspiring to me when I get a feeling back, and it happens a lot, I have to say, that people have managed to, sort of cross some of those hurdles or overcome some of those hurdles. That is the inspiring thing for me.
The flip side of things, what's the best piece of advice that you have ever been given?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's always interesting to hear what people say when you ask them that question. For me, in my early years as a faculty member, I had a friend, somebody who's remained a friend over all of these years. And she said to me, Sean, you got to realize, and she drew this magical big circle in the air. And she said, this is life. And then she drew a smaller circle inside. This is work. That our lives are a combination of so many different things, our loved ones, our partners, our parents, our pets, our communities, so many different things. And our jobs aren't even our work. I mean, there's a difference between our specific jobs that we occupy and the work of an entire career. But it's always important to keep a perspective about these things because sometimes we can feel as if work starts to expand to the point that it crowds out literally everything else in your life, or you can feel as if the stakes are just so high in whatever you're doing in your work that it makes it okay to neglect yourself and your physical and your mental health. You always have to maintain a sense of perspective on things, which is certainly not saying that it's not a good idea to be passionate about things or to invest in things and to care about things. But it's sort of a little bit of a caveat to always remember that to keep things in proportion and perspective.
And relatedly, how are you staying mentally and physically healthy right now during this later stage of the global pandemic?
Right. I think one of the things that you discover, sleep and exercise are really, really critical. I mean, and it sounds so benign. And I mean, I think sometimes benign and banal, I guess, sort of not particularly inspired or insightful. I think we've always kind of known how important sleep was and that people are not at their physical and mental best and don't interact particularly well when they're deprived of sleep. I think COVID has just thrown people's lives into a lot of turmoil around working hours and when, you're picking up messages on your phone and all of the rest, and just doing everything that you can to maintain regular sleep hours and to get enough sleep. And I've made that a priority. I think exercise also really, really important. And for me, I find ways to get exercise in different ways that don't necessarily require being in a crowded gym. But make sure that I get exercise every day anyway. And I think that's really, really, really important. And as things relax in different parts, but they tighten up, I think it's important to keep finding ways to get outside, get fresh air, and to exercise because, man, sitting in front of Zoom hour after hour or being on the computer or writing messages can be really taxing. And then last thing, I think it's really, really important. That whole work-life balance thing is really critical. And it's good to, when it's possible, not always possible, but when it's possible, to decide on a time to turn the computer off, to move away and to go connect socially with folks. If it's, on Zoom, if you want to carry on the work day, but in a different way, but with friends and family, okay, that could work. but to disconnect from the things about work that are stressful in some way and to change gears and to either get absorbed in some television or movies or media or whatever, or to find ways, find things that take you out of the space of work, because again, it can be just really immersive. The whole pandemic work cycle and rhythm can be really punishing over time. And I think it's true of clinicians who are, sort of taking care of patients. They need to watch their sleep, make sure they're getting some exercise. Although very few nurses on the front lines of direct care lack for exercise in the course of their day, but maybe it's exercise in a different form, but especially the unplugging and doing something different. And, I guess limiting the amount of media consumption in the form of like news media, because at a time when there's new things that are coming out all the time, some of them are anxiety provoking and there's so much uncertainty in it all. You have to have some space in your life where you're not thinking about COVID and what it's changing and what it might mean.
And as the cities reopen and as the towns reopen, I think that there's even more opportunity to reconnect with people you haven't talked to or seen in a year. So it's a very exciting time, a very optimistic, very hopeful time.
It is. At NYU in the Meyers College, I chair the committee that's been looking after restarting activities in terms of face-to-face instruction and so forth, and keeping students in clinical experiences and so forth. And our last conference Zoom call, the level of excitement among the faculty and the administrators and staff about the potential for coming back. Actually, our students have already been on site and are interacting with each other, and their excitement is something that we've heard a lot about, that they are very eager. They are ready to go, ready for action. They want to be useful. They want to learn skills. They want to get into the field to make their impact. And they're sort of on the leading edge of what's going in terms of society restarting after COVID.
Terrific. And so, Sean, I got a question for you. This is one of my favorites on the show. So say you talk about sleep. So let's tie it this way. Say you go to sleep and you get to wake up 10 years into the future. What does the future of nursing look like, whether that's at Meyers College or just nursing in general?
So my dream, and if I can get, and I like that, I like working it in with the, you wake up from a good restful sleep and the world is sort of in a different place. I'm a big fan of technology. And, I came to nursing school at a time where there was no home internet, where we had rotary dial phones and so forth. And the availability of information and the availability of technology that helps us do our work in nursing is really awesome. And it's growing really, really fast. But it's still a little clunky in some ways. And what I would love to see as the future of the profession, and it is going to happen, is just the internet and the interfaces that we use, the technology that we use being so seamlessly blended in with the way nurses and educators do their work, so that it really does feel like an extension of ourselves, and we are able to have information at our fingertips at all times that helps us do as well as possible for patients, or helps people learn to take care of patients, that we could make it even better. And we're already on that path. But the future, I think, of nursing is a future where technology isn't something that ever slows you down. It's always something that makes you feel as if you're able to give better informed, higher quality of care to patients.
And Sean, final question here. Do you have any final thoughts or advice for our care heroes?
I thank you for the time to talk to you and them. It's a very exciting time to be involved in healthcare, to be involved in nursing. And I think that the one piece of advice that I would give is to always remain open to the possibilities that you didn't consider, to listen, to keep your ears open and your eyes open to the opportunities that may present themselves, to connect with people, to talk with people, and not to necessarily to be limited by the plans that they might have formulated early on. That evolving in your plans and evolving in your approach to your career is actually not a sign of failure. It's a sign of progress. And it's a shame not to take advantage of all of the potentials, all the potential opportunities in nursing by not being open to that. So to stay open and to keep your eyes open and to look at what the future might look like and how you might prepare for it. And to realize that the present is quite a bit different than the way the future is likely to be. And that's okay. It's okay.
being adaptable, being a sponge, being open to new experiences. I think all those things really, really, really key from all the things you've said today. Thank you so much, Sean, for taking some time to join us.
I really appreciate your time and the opportunity to talk to your listeners. Thank you.
Man, what an amazing episode with Sean. His enthusiasm and love for teaching is so inspiring.
Yeah, Martin, I know. And it's always so great to hear from such passionate care heroes. Now it's time for the handover.
All right, Care Heroes, here are our top takeaways from this episode. Prioritize self-care. Always make sure to take care of yourself first so that you can stay healthy inside and out. Also, taking care of yourself ensures that you can take better care of those around you too. Surround yourself with good people and good environments. Don't force yourself to stick around for anyone or anything that isn't good for you or your health and well-being. Don't be afraid to communicate your thoughts, ideas, concerns, and feelings. Always remember, you are a valued individual. And lastly, stay open to new opportunities and don't get discouraged if things don't go according to plan. People and situations that you may not have considered before can actually lead you towards amazing opportunities and paths. Be open to evolve as you go.
With such a terrific episode, of course, it's such a terrific handover as well. We also want to thank our Care Heroes for listening, and don't forget to rate our podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you want a shout out on a future episode, just visit careheropodcast.com, go to the Contact Us page, and submit your name, role, and location for a shout out on a future episode.
You got it, Gerard. Now it's time for some shout outs.
We want to give a shout out to Miguel, registered nurse from Durham, North Carolina, Alex, occupational therapist from Salt Lake City, Utah, and Tanisha, licensed vocational nurse from Los Angeles, California.
That's a wrap, Care Heroes. Thanks for joining us. Catch you next time. Same Care Hero time, same Care Hero channel.
Thanks for listening to Care Hero Podcast. Don't miss out on future content. Hit subscribe and rate us in your favorite podcast app. Also, remember to visit us at careheropodcast.com to send us your feedback, sign up for the newsletter, and nominate a Care Hero to be interviewed on a future episode.